Yeah, so I'm just, as usual, I'm just gonna go in these videos and just talk, and you guys will listen or not listen. It's really up to you. But yeah. Anyway, I'm doing an arc review for Gintama after such a long time, right? And many reasons why I'm doing this. What is really? I'm just bored as of late. I'm just really bored. Um, last month or so, I've just been trying to find ways to spend my time, and I figured this would be a good way to spend my time. I got the Spyro and the Crash trilogies for Switch because they were on sale for Black Friday, so I've been playing through those. I just beat Spyro 1 and Crash 1, so I'm on Spyro and Crash 2, Spyro 2 and Crash 2. And I also just started poking around a little in that Record of Ragnarok, that Shumatsu no Valkyrie manga. So I've been trying to keep myself busy, and I figured this would be a good way for me to spend my time now, at least for the foreseeable future, like revisiting Gintama, which I've been on record saying is one of my favorite shonen, one of my favorite series. Kintoki is, you know, one of my favorite characters ever. So, yeah, I just thought it would be better for me to. It would be good for me to revisit this arc. What I think I did a review for the Rakuyo Showdown arc back in 2016, and that got like a lot of criticism from a lot of fans and just a lot of people who ended up watching it. They agreed or disagreed, and that's fine. But I think that's good because now I'm planning to go through the entire end game of Gintama to see if I feel any differently, like how I feel now. And really, it's just about you know, for myself, really coming up with a more refined and updated opinion. And over the years, over the last, I mean, it's just 5 years, it's not too long, but my understanding for myself of how to see a series, or I don't even say review. I don't even like the word review a series because it makes me sound like I'm a critic or something like that. But I don't even want to say review series. But the way that I see series now, or that how I personally, what I think is quality and what is not quality, that stuff has changed since back then. So I want to apply those things, uh, you know, to these arcs that I've already reviewed to see if I have come up with a new opinion or not. And so yeah, that's basically what this is. I just want to revisit the Shogun assassination arc and just give my thoughts, put my thoughts out there, and that's really all it is, really. Um, so with that being said, I general thoughts. I still think it's a great arc. I think at the time I said it was one of the best arcs in Shonen, and I would probably still say that holds up true. And because I've learned a little more, like the way the way I see things now is different than how it was back then. I've picked up like on some things that happen not just in this arc but in Gintama as a story as a whole, and how that comes to the forefront of the story, thematically. Um, so yeah, but in general, I still think this is a very solid arc. I think it's still a great arc. Whether it's still the best arc in Gintama or not, I would still probably say it is. I would still probably say it is. That opinion may change once I get to the final arc, or even the Rakuyo Showdown arc. We'll see how I feel about that when I get to it. I'm currently in the Farewell Shinsengumi arc. I just got to the part in the manga where what's his name? The Shinsengumi disguise themselves as the Mimawara Gumi, and then they fake Matsudaira's capture, and then Hijikata starts fighting Saburo in the forest. So I'm at that part right now, and then Sogo is fighting what's her name, Nobume on the cliff, and then obviously Gin is fighting Oboro on the cliff as well. So that's the part where I am in the manga right now. And another thing that I want to do with this is actually I want to compare it to the anime. And if you see my streams or followed me for a minute, or you just follow me on Twitter, whatever it is, you guys probably have heard of like my misgivings with modern anime in general, like the way that things are directed, the choice of music, or how bright the coloring how bright the coloring can be, or how bright the lighting can be, even in darkly lit scenes, and how all that stuff, all those things that I'm mentioning, plays itself into the mood of the scene, or the flavor of a scene, as I like to call it, or the atmosphere, whatever you want to call it, and how that really reflects on the viewer, or how the viewer intakes that and processes it, right? So another thing I wanted to do was really like compare the manga to the anime. It wasn't like a pure one to one. It wasn't a pure one to one comparison. But what I can say is I definitely do prefer the manga now. because there are just some things in the anime I just think are very odd, and I don't know if it's because I've gotten older or because I'm revisiting Gintama after a while. But one thing that really stood out to me as like a sore thumb, at least when I'm rewatching like quote unquote famous Gintama scenes, is some of the music really doesn't hit that it doesn't hit correctly and it doesn't hit hard in the later arcs especially. Some of the earlier arcs are still good, right? Like especially one my favorite track is probably the Unsustainable Darkness, right? I think all the Gintama tracks that have like that melancholic sounding guitar I think are all great. But the tracks that I'm talking about are some of the more like orchestral arc, some of the more can't even speak right, orchestral tracks. So say the one that plays like during the Shogun's funeral, for example, or Utsuro's theme, right? These tracks don't really come across as tracks for me to take seriously, right? Gintama has always been like a humorous series, right? So sometimes when you hear like tracks playing with orchestral instruments, they're not supposed to come across as serious tracks, even though an orchestra in of itself, or a violin, a cello, whatever you want to say, those tend to be instruments that produce dramatic or they tend to produce dramatic pieces of music that are meant to be taken seriously, not comedically or humorously, right? And I think that's kind of the problem here. The tone of even though they're using an orchestra and even though they're making these themes, they don't come across as something that helps the mood or highlights the mood, or it it's hard to take the scene seriously, or as seriously as they should be taken with those tracks playing. But I'll talk about that later. I just really want to talk about the Shogun Assassination arc, and I think what I first want to start off with is what I didn't like, and then go into what I did like. Just get the bats. What I thought were flaws of the arc first. And so the first flaw that I want to mention is Zenzo actually not being a traitor, right? So at the beginning of this arc, Zenzo is kind of being posed in the story as this guy who has betrayed his friends and whatnot, and understandably so. He's cut off a double's head and everything. But what I would say for someone like me, and not even just because I've read it, if I haven't read or watched the the Shogun Assassination arc, Zenzo not actually being a traitor was a pretty obvious plot point in my opinion. Considering all the hilarity and serious moments that have ensued with him, whether it's the hemorrhoid stuff or even his serious stuff, even his serious role like in the Red Spider arc with Jiraiya and Tsukuyo, he was a part. He had a serious role in that arc too. So when you consider all the moments beforehand, it's hard to think that with as strong a bond as he has with all the characters, it's hard to imagine him actually being like a villain and a traitor. So the fact that Sorachi tried to propose this as something that was meant to be taken seriously, it was just hard to believe. And then a reason that was given in the series, in the manga and the anime, was that he'll sell them out for money. That was just hard to believe. Like I said, for all the previous reasons, like we've seen them in so many comedic situations. Obviously, these comedic situations are meant for you to care about them as a group, like their friends and all that. So for you to think that, or for Sorachi or the anime series to expect us to believe that that Zenzo is actually a traitor, that was just not a good plot point in my opinion, and it just wasn't genuine. Um, After that, it's just really like small moments here and there, like when where the arc takes place for the majority of the arc is in that village, the Iga village, right? And so there's three heads of Iga ninja, right? So you have Zenzo himself, then you have Momochi, and then you have this guy named Fujibayashi, right? And there's a plot point in the arc where Fujibayashi and Momochi, like they kind of, in a way, the Iga Jonin are presented as mercenaries, if you will. They're not necessarily loyal to the shogun. They're loyal to people who will give them the most money, and that's perfectly fine. I don't really have a problem with that. But there is a point where Momochi is revealed to not actually, be in league with who paid her the most money, and Fujibayashi is. So Fujibayashi is then killed by Momochi because Momochi, with her puppet, she unleashes like some huge mechanical ass like Samus hyper beam like laser at him, right? And that moment's good, right? But it was just, and again, this is like a very small moment. Fujibayashi's recognition that Momomochi wasn't with him was the problem. And again, it's not a big problem. It's not like a major problem either, but it was something that I did notice when I was reading through the manga. Right, and so him recognizing that Momochi wasn't with him was just too quick a moment. Like it's almost like he had like fucking mind reading or something. I just felt like the pacing of that scene, of that particular moment, I should say, was just a little too quick. And again, I already mentioned the Zenzo stuff, him being a traitor. But another problem that I had with that was the idea of Zenzo going down in history as a criminal. I think that's okay and that does work. But it almost seems a bit too dramatic here in Gintama for some reason. I was trying to find like a good way to like verbalize this, but it doesn't seem genuine, right? It doesn't seem like it's okay as a plot point, but it just doesn't seem as something that, like, oh my god, like, Zenzo's gonna go down as a criminal in all of history. Like it's like some serious like dramatic moment in the series of Gintama. It just doesn't come across like that, even though, they're trying to push it like. They're trying to push that moment to be like that. Okay. So now we're getting into some like bigger problems, and obviously the biggest one is obviously with Shoyo and Utsuro being a thing. But before I get to that, I want to talk about really Takasugi. So because it's been a while since I've read and watched Gintama, I was refamiliarizing myself a little bit with like previous arcs and everything, and obviously Takasugi wants to, take down the government and destroy the world, and that's actually a whole nother. I'll save that for like when I do the probably the Rokuyo Showdown arc, because that's when I think a major. Well, actually, I'm going to talk about it here too, but that's when I think like a major flaw in his character, in terms of how his character is written, comes to the forefront, and why I don't think that his character is necessarily as good as it was before that reveal, right? And what I'm talking about here is his want to kill Shige, the Shogun, in this arc, right? So in the Rakuyo Showdown arc, Takasugi has always been aware that Utsuro was there, right? He always knew that. This is actually like a straight up line of dialogue. Takasugi knew that Utsuro was a thing, even when he saw Gintoki decapitate Shoyo. So that right then and there, it causes like a bunch of plot holes. Like why is he so like angry, and etc. etc. Well, maybe not why he's so angry, right? But I mean, not why he's so angry, because he can probably understand that Shoyo is a personality and that Utsuro is like the predominant personality, if you will. So by killing him, sure, like the body is still alive, and what the other personalities are alive, but the personality that you grow to see as a father is not there anymore. So that's, I think, it's very. I don't know if it's necessarily suitable for a series like Gintama, but there's a line of logic there, right? But what I'm talking about is the want to kill the Shogun, right? It doesn't make any sense when you consider he knew that Utsuro was always there. He wants to kill Shige, the Shogun who does end up dying at the end of the arc, and he wants to put in a new puppet Shogun to serve. Like he's going to be their proxy, and obviously the guy that I'm talking about is Nobunobu, right? So obviously Takasugi's entire end goal is to kill the Tendoshu, but it just seems like needlessly convoluted and complex, like for no reason. Like why do you need to go and put a new shogun in to reach the Tendoshu? You can just reach the Tendoshu straight up. You've seen the Tendoshu, deal with the Harusame, and you yourself are friends with Kamui, who is the captain of the Seventh Harusame, or the captain of the Seventh Harusame Battalion. Right, so instead of going through all this, this hoopla to, kill a shogun who, by all means, is a pretty good guy, right? Shige is not someone like Nobunobu or Sada, right? I mean, I can understand him killing Sada. Sada was the one that went ahead and did the whole Kansai purge, so attacking him perfectly makes sense, right? But to this want to kill Shige to put in your own shogun just doesn't serve any purpose to reach the Tendoshu, when there are so much more easier ways to reach the Tendoshu to begin with, So I that was a whole flaw of the arc to me, that this idea that he needs to kill Shige to get to obvious. I mean, it doesn't explicitly say that he's doing this to get to get to the Tendoshu, but when you understand his overall character, obviously, like, this is what he is trying to do to reach that goal. And it just seems like this is needlessly, it's just unnecessary, really. It's like you're putting yourself through all this grief when you can just, go through the Harusami, or just even go straight up like to their base to begin with, Anyway, so that was a problem I had. Another problem I had was Shige wanting to save Zenzo. Um, and the problem that I have with this, I just think that this is way too friendship heavy as a moment, right? I've always looked at Gintama as a unique shonen, right? And this is kind of when I was reviewing it back then, 5 years ago or whatever, when I was putting out chapter reviews, whatever it was, or what my thoughts were. Gintama always stood out to me compared to, say, something like, One Piece or Fairy Tail, because there was a heavy dose of reality that was put into the relationships between characters, right? So even though someone is, you may be close to someone, or, this guy is your father, or this guy is your friend, just because they are your friend doesn't mean that you're always going to, do quote unquote the friendship thing. And obviously we see this with Hijikata and Mitsuba's husband in the Mitsuba arc, right? One sec, hold up. Let me get some water. We see this in the Beam Saber arc with Gintoki and the guy who trained Otai and Shinpachi. So there was always this sense of reality, or, well, I don't know if necessarily reality is the right word, but it was the friendship moments in Gintama were never as exaggerated as they were in a series, say, like Fairy Tail, right? So when I see Shige wanting to save Zenzo here, it's not the feeling that he wants to save Zenzo, right? It's the fact that he actually goes through with it, even though he's the Shogun. That's the problem for me, right? Because if you're going to have yourself be put in danger once again by having yourself go out there to save Zenzo from, he's fighting the Kiheitai at the moment, right? He blows up the ship with what's his name, Takasugi on it, right? If you're going to go out of your way to put yourself in danger once again, you're pretty much making your body double sacrifices for naught, right? And that was the whole thing. The fact that Zenzo killed the body double, right? He killed the body double, and again, Zenzo killing the body double is the whole thing. Like what I'm talking about with I forget his name, the guy who trained Otai and Shinpachi in the Beam Saber arc. What I'm talking about with Mitsuba's husband, etc., right? But you're pretty much making that for naught, and it's not. And again, I'm not complaining about his want to save Zenzo because he's his friend. That's perfectly understandable. It's the fact that they actually try to go ahead and do that when he is the Shogun. There should be a way for him to help without being, for him to help his friends without him, without putting that body double sacrifice, without making it in vain, I should say, right? Or actually, I should say blatantly, making it in vain, like just like going out like into the battlefield, like, like then what did he give his life for? Like you just, there was no point behind that. But the good thing about this moment is that it's actually very momentary, as Abuto and the other Yato, they find them almost instantly, like when their ship crashes into the Iga village and then they come out of the ship. So the moment, like I said, the moment itself is very quick and momentary, but I just don't like that this moment was even being talked about, right? I mean, you're dealing with the government. To say something as serious as the government, and like I said before, Gintama is a shonen that tends to not go that extreme friendship heavy route the same way that Fairy Tail does. Now, don't get me wrong, bonds between characters is certainly important, and they will certainly sacrifice a lot of things for each other, but there is this heavy dose of consequences for doing stuff like that, right? And obviously Shige dies at the end, but what I'm talking about here is just more so the fact that he feels the need to do that when he's the Shogun. I don't think that should happen. And again, I don't mind Shige struggling with his inability to not be steadfast in not helping his friends. That's okay. But does the moment have to be that drawn out with repeating what is obvious about his journey as a political leader, making hard decisions? I mean, this is what you do. This is what a political leader does, whether you're a shogun, whether you're a king. This is what you do. You make sacrifices, and it's not so much that Sorachi or the studio, they can't express that, but for Shige to suddenly like questioning himself, like in the middle of this when he's been shogun for I don't know how long, for like I would say probably like a good while, right? So when you consider that, him struggling, right? I want to phrase this as correctly as I can or as properly as I can. Him feeling that way is okay, right? But him struggling that mightily with this drawn out nature, that itself is the problem, right? He's all of a sudden questioning himself, like, yo, is this the right thing to do? Like, dude, you've been the shogun for like I don't know how many years. Like, you shouldn't be spouting that dialogue. You know what's up. You know what's up, right? And then they, I in the manga especially, there was like this repeated use of his past with Sarutobi and Zenzo, showing them coming up together as kids, and it just kind of didn't make that moment very genuine, at least to me when I was reading it. And the other thing was it wasn't just the shogun that was feeling this way. It was Sachan, it was Sarutobi herself too. She had a line of dialogue where she was like, we got to save our friends too. We have to save our friends. And again, it's what I was saying, right? I've always viewed Gintama as a series that balances the maturity with the typical shonen aspects, but there's a sense of maturity that it handles pretty decently and pretty well, right? Again, I don't think it's handled well here for either Sarutobi or for the Shogun because of how serious that political side really is. There's all this talk of governments and everything, but you're willing to like just throw that away for, I mean, again, you're willing to throw that away for the sake of a friend. Like, that's very admirable and everything, but is that right when you consider like all the other previous arcs that we've seen, like with Mitsuba, with the Beam Saber arc? And again, I'm just repeating these over and over again just to kind of stress, this balance of maturity with the friendship stuff. So yeah, so I didn't like that. Another part I didn't like, and it seems like I'm saying a lot of stuff that I don't like, but I promise you, I still like this arc. I know I'm already 20 minutes in, but just listen to me talk, I guess. I'll try to speed this up as much as I can. Another moment, again, very momentary, was Sarachi drawing Abuto holding Puppet Momochi's head dramatically. So when they're fighting the Yato, I think they take down 4. Abuto comes and he meets Gintoki. He meets the Yorozuya and the Shogun, and he's actually holding the Momochi, right? So he's holding the puppet head, so the bandage, the mummy one, right? And he's holding this puppet's head in such a dramatic way as if to tell the reader, like, yo, like, this is like a huge ocean moment, like, she's fucking dead, right? But the reason that this doesn't work was because we already knew that this wasn't the real Momochi previously, right? When you go and you see this in the anime or you see it in the manga, the intended effect of this panel with Abuto holding the puppet Momochi's head was to be like, oh shit, Momochi is dead. Like, that was the entire point of that panel. Like, that is what Sorachi is trying to convey to the reader. But again, that doesn't work here since we already know that this is not her real body, right? So it's really how he drew it, right? He drew it so dramatically as if, there was like shading and everything. It's like, why? Dramatic shading as if to tell us like, yo, like, she's fucking dead. But it's like, no, she's not fucking dead. Like, that's the puppet body. So that was a problem for me. And one big problem, this is probably the biggest problem that I have. So the fight between Gintoki and Takasui is great. But thinking about it now, Takasugi wanting to inflict a lot of pain on Gintoki, despite knowing that Tendoshu is their enemy, it's 50-50 to me, right? See, on one hand, it's very whack, right? Because as we learn later in the Rakuyo Showdown arc, he already knew Utsuro was a thing, right? He already knew Utsuro was a thing. And here in the Shogun Assassination arc, he's talking about, how much he hates Kintoki, or not how much he hates Kintoki, but how much, like, they're mad at themselves for being weak, right? That's why they're fighting in the first place, right? But I also understand that Takasugi needs to vent his pain on Gin, right? Takasugi and Gintoki, they have this bond, right? They have this specific that moment when Gintoki killed Shoyo is something that is special, and well, not special like in a good way, but it is something that is memorable for both Gin and Takasugi, and so they share something because of that. So because Gintoki can be the only person that can take Takasugi's pain because of that moment, that makes sense to me. But this is where it gets really fucked up, right? This is where I think like that whole thing falls apart. Two things. One is that, first of all, Takasugi's wanting to, well, three things really. Takasugi, he's wanting to inflict this pain on Gintoki, right? Despite knowing the Tendoshu is their enemy. I've already said that. But the second thing is that Gintoki doesn't. It's this is what Takasugi is talking about, him like needing to vent their pain and everything. That's not true for Gintoki. That's not true for Gintoki. Gintoki, there is no reason for Gintoki to fight and attack Takasugi or to feel any sort of animosity towards Takasugi because of what happened with Shoyo. He can feel animosity towards Takasugi because he feels that he isn't being, quote unquote, a good disciple of Shoyo, and because he's doing, something as extremely evil and violent as trying to overthrow a government, right? And which, again, this kind of falls apart when we later learn that he always knew of Utsuro, and he always, and again, we'll talk about that like in another video. But the way that Takasugi feels about, having to let out his emotions and let out his pain instead of bottling up that pain in, that's not true for Gintoki. That isn't true for Gintoki. And we know this isn't true for Gintoki because when they fight during this arc, there's a line of dialogue where Gintoki says, too bad, I won't lose to my emotions. And what does he mean by that? He's saying that yes, he's very angry at the Tendoshu. There's a lot of hatred and pain and sadness towards them for it. But Gintoki won't allow himself to take that out, to take those emotions out on innocence the same way that Takasugi has. And the reason this is a problem is because Takasugi, there's like this whole speech about how Takasugi is like the one for Gintoki to lay his hands on, right? This is who Gintoki needs to, like, this is who he needs to punch. This is who he needs to like fight in the, like punch in the face and like let out all his screams and anger and rage on, right? And that's just not true. That's just not true because of what Gintoki said. And again, the problem is that the series, the manga and the anime are portraying this as like some one epic speech that like Takasugi, like what he's saying right now about, them being like the two for each other. This is the truth. Like this is actually like this is the thing. And it's just not, because Gintoki denies that. He denies it. He denies it like very early on, but then they still decide to continue on with that speech as if Takasugi is telling the truth. As if like this is something that is true for them. And again, that's just not true. And then this leads into the third thing that, this whole thing between Gintoki and Takasugi and Shoyo. Katsura was there too. Katsura, people forget this, but Takasugi and Katsura have known each other the longest. They went together at the same school and then joined Gintoki and Shoyo at the same time. So in this, and I know Katsura isn't part of this arc, but the idea that Gintoki and Takasugi are like these two like rivals that are like, butting heads, like they're like Dante and Virgil or Goku and Vegeta or Naruto and Sasuke or Yugi and Kaiba or someone like that, right? Like they're like these rivals because of what happened with Shoyo. Like Katsura probably feels the same way. He's just as important as they are, right? You don't think that Katsura, doesn't want to stop Takasugi? I mean, I get it. Gintoki was the one that actually cut his head off, but this idea that those three as disciples of Shoyo, right? That Gintoki's and Takasugi's relationship because of Shoyo dying is a little more special and at least Katsura in the dust. I don't think that's good writing at all. I don't think that's good writing, and I think the idea that trying to posit this as trying to posit Shoyo's death as the basis for Gintoki's and Takasugi's vitriolic relationship, I don't think that's a good plot point at all because of how it excludes Katsura. Katsura, again, is just as important. He should feel some type of way. And again, I'm still rereading and I'm still rewatching, so we'll have to see how Katsura felt, if that's even expanded on, about how he felt about Shoyo's death. But again, I just don't think this entire speech about Takasugi saying that Gintoki needs to lay his hand specifically on Takasugi is true. I mean, I think it's true for Takasugi. He needs to hit Gintoki because he needs to vent his pain on him. But I don't think that the reverse holds true for Gintoki doing the same to Takasugi. It doesn't need to be specifically Takasugi or specifically Katsura. It should be the Tendoshu. It should be Oboro and, you know, the Naruku and them. So other things I didn't like. This I like Gin and Takasugi kind of asking each other to. So there's this scene in the arc, right, where it's them it's them in the past. Their backs are to each other, and you know, Takasugi is saying, like, you know, if I should die, please take care of Shoyo, and then Gintoki says, I'll ask the same, but I'll ask you, you know, I'm gonna ask something else. Survive, right? He asks him to survive more than anything. Stay alive is what he says, and I actually really like that moment, right? But the problem, again, a small moment here. I didn't like the dialogue before this because Takasugi is asking Gintoki, why did you even decide to fight in this war? And it's just kind of like, what are you talking about, man? It's like, Shoyo was taken by the Naruku, and you know why you're fucking fighting in the war. You're fighting with your comrades and everything. There is a goal for you to do. So I just felt like the dialogue before that could have been better. I don't know why Sorachi had Takasugi say what he did about, like, why are you fighting in this war, for glory or for fame? It just, I mean, if you've been following the story so far, like, it just doesn't seem like a realistic or genuine thing for Takasugi to ask Kintoki, you know. And yeah, again, Takasugi being as old as he is and using Shoyo's death to commit crimes, I don't think that's good writing at all. I mean, again, it's hard to get over the death of someone you consider family at any age, whether you're 16 or 26 or 45 or 54, whoever it is, right? Like, family members dying causes a lot of grief in the heart, regardless of your age, right? But you were 16 years old when you know, Shoyo died, and now you're 26, and you're using this as an excuse to commit all this destruction. You know what I mean? And again, we don't know yet that Takasugi knew about Shoyo, and that this is all kind of just like a farce to get to the Tendoshu, pretty much. Even though you could probably guess that too. But you know, I don't know, to use something. I don't know. If you wanted to do that, I feel like you could have shown Takasugi to be a little more mentally insane, rather than him being like in a, you know, clear state of mind and using this as a motivation, as justification. It's someone like, say, like Sensui, right? Like, Sensui in Yu Yu Hakusho works because Sensui's he's clinically and mentally insane. Like, he actually has a real life, you know, mental disorder called dissociative identity disorder. So even though his logic makes no sense, you can pretty much excuse that because he's actually criminally mentally insane. Takasugi, on the other hand, doesn't really have that. I mean, sure, he's megalomaniac, but those are all like typical villain states of mind, right? Like, that's different from actually being like criminally insane, like in the same lane as Sensui or Joker, or I'm trying to think of even like the Cybermen in Dragon Ball Z, right? Like, incapable of thought and all this stuff. So yeah, I didn't like that. And that's pretty much it for like as far as like my problems with the arc in general. If I wanted to go into more like specific anime things, I didn't like how the anime made Takasugi's reaction to Shoyo's death when Gintoki's like walking up and you don't see Gintoki's face or his eyes, I should say, and then you just see like Takasugi's face like contorting like in sadness and fear. It's way too anime. I don't like these modern stories. I don't like the way that I don't like how stuff can be super exaggerated, especially in modern anime, and that's what it comes across here. Like, Takasugi's like his face and like mouth and everything is, and to hear it's like contorting like so, like, I don't know, weirdly. And I get he's 16 years old and everything, but to hear what's his name, Takahito Koyasu, like try to like portray that, didn't come across, and it's not his fault. It's just, I don't know. They were trying to go for like that super anime reaction, like try to hit you in your feels, you know, have like this guy like cry and like be sad and everything, and it just didn't come across as tasteful to me. And another problem that I had, and this is my last thing before I actually get into the good stuff about this arc. There's one piano track that was just played way too much in the anime, and this is what I was talking about like towards the beginning of the video. This is especially true for Utsuro's theme in the next arc, in the Farewell Shinsengumi arc, which is I hope I'm gonna put that video out later, sometime this week or something. But there's this one piano track that plays. So I'm trying to think. So when Zenzo is believed to be dead, right? Where when his quote unquote fake death scene when Sarutobi saves him, um, when he's like remembering about like how people are or how ninjas are dumb for like pledging their loyalty to to a master or to a lord and dying in battle for them, he thinks that's stupid. And the scene that's playing in the anime, it has this piano track playing. It's a new track for that arc. It actually debuted in that arc in the anime, and that particular piano track I think is played way too much in the arc, in my opinion. And it really, that and Utsuro's theme in the next arc, the way that they're overplayed, it really reminds me of Dragon Ball Super, where the Ultra Instinct theme was played every single fucking 5 or 10 minutes for the dumbest of fights. So that was a problem that I had, and actually that's why I prefer the manga, for the Shogun Assassination arc. The Shogun Assassination arc in the manga, and obviously, adaptations in the manga, at least in my opinion, just generally tend to be better. But the reason I'm talking about it here is because most people prefer the Gintama anime to the Gintama manga, and at least for me, now that I've read it both, I've read and watched it, you know, recently too, rewatched and reread it. I can, my personal opinion is that the storytelling is just way better in the manga, and it comes across as much more genuine. And obviously that makes sense because Sorachi is the original author, and that's how he writes it, and that's how he draws it. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like Gintama anime, like this is kind of like really a turning point for the Gintama anime in terms of like the atmosphere, in terms of the mood, the storytelling, the storytelling techniques, like even subtle things as just like, the coloring of a scene. And I don't know, I maybe I'm not making a whole lot of sense to you, like what I'm saying right now, but these things like feed itself into like how a watcher or reader, like they perceive a particular moment or character moment or scene or the story in general, right? So I just think that it comes across as better in the manga than it does in the anime. And that's pretty much it for the flaws. So actually, let's talk about something a little more positive, what I liked about the arc. And I gotta say, Zenzo is a fucking beast, dude. Zenzo is awesome, man. Like Zenzo, like his fake death scene, the fact that he was taking on that many Harasame, him stalling Kamui and Takasugi before Gintoki and Kagura come to fight them. He is just an overall beast. He's just awesome, and that's what made him. I think I have to remember like who my favorite characters are, like in particular rankings. But Zenzo is just like a straight up beast. This arc really put him like at the top for me. And then the ending of the arc, or actually I should say the beginning of the next arc, where you see him just like so despondent that Shige died anyway. Oh man, you just like felt really bad for him. But another reason I really like this arc, and a reason like why I hold it like really dear to my heart, is because I learned some very valuable lessons about life, and that's what Gintama does, right? It teaches you about life in some way, right? And one valuable lesson that I learned here is there are things that are more important than one's life, and one such thing is what they want to protect. So for Shoyo, it was his students, and Gintoki understood that, right? Gintoki understood that what Shoyo valued more than his own life was his students. So that's why he went ahead and he killed Shoyo with his own, or he decapitated Shoyo with his own hands, because he understood that, right? This doesn't hold true for Shoyo, it also holds true for the Shogun. He also understood that more important than the Shogun, than his own life, was his duty as the Shogun. His duty as the Shogun was to preserve the nation. So even if he dies, if it comes to sacrificing the Shogun's life or preserving the future of the nation, the Shogun must die. And Shigeshige understood that. So the parallel of these two and their explanations of these things, I thought were just incredible. And another valuable lesson that I learned was Shoyo's definition of Bushido. So when you see Takasugi as a kid, and you see him first join Shoyo's dojo, right? When you first see him join Shoyo's dojo, Shoyo gives him his own definition of what Bushido or what a samurai is, and he's talking about how a samurai is someone who continues to struggle and suffer while trying to stick to their own ideals and find the best version of themselves. And I think this definition is just so fucking immaculate because I think it's really a life mantra to hold on to, and just really hold on to it and think about it like in whatever you do, right? Like it's okay to suffer, it's okay to like resist, but as long as you stay true to yourself and like what's in your heart, like it's okay for you to fail. And I think that's like a great message. And again, what I was saying with Shoyo, Shige also has a similar definition. Shige, the shogun, he's giving a speech about resisting the times, and I love this speech about resisting the times. Everyone, or not everyone, but if you may or may not know, my favorite, at least story based video game series is Metal Gear, right? And at the end of Peace Walker, Big Boss is talking with Kaz, and Big Boss is talking about how the biggest enemy that they're going to fight in the coming years are the times themselves because the era is shifting, policies are changing, governments are changing, society is changing, and their place as a mercenary, it's in jeopardy. Like their existence as mercenaries, it's in jeopardy because they don't know like how they're going to exist or like what it's going to be a mercenary in these new times. And I think this is what 1970, 1980, something like that. I'm forgetting the time period, but Shige's speech about resisting the times, right? Now that Nobunobu is the new shogun, he's their proxy. Now that their forces are basically decimated, there's a new dark power that is taking a hold of the throne, right? There's a new dark political power that has come into power, and there are new times coming. So Shige giving a speech about resisting those times, that new era, is similar to Shoyo's definition of a samurai. Still trying to resist that, but staying true to what is in his own heart. And I think that's just like a great message, right? Let me take some water. So I really like that. Hijikata and Kondo going through trapdoors when they first reached the Iga Jonin village. I thought that was hilarious. Like them, they go through the trapdoors and then they actually end up saving. Shinpachi and the Shogun when the Yato are chasing them, like in the cliff. That was pretty. That was funny. I like that. The body double taking Shige's place for half a year in the past so that his scar could heal after rescuing him was great because you could see that there's always like this talk about like how body doubles are just body doubles, right? They're no one important, but Shige has like this pure heart and this pure soul that he's willing to actually go back and save that body double's life. So that's obviously what gave the body double so much admiration for the real Shogun, and that's ultimately what ended up that's why he allowed Zenzo to kill him, right? Because it was like for an actual true friend. So I really like that moment. The fact that he took his place and acted like him for half a year as kids, I think that's just like something that is so admirable. Another thing I really like is the tension of the Yato hunting down the Yorozeya and the Shogun down. I think you can just really feel it. Like it takes them so much time or just so much effort to kill 4 Yato, and then you just see Abuto come in with like with even more Yato, and then you can really feel like the exertion and the effort and the exhaustion while they're running away from the Yato and fighting them because they really have no choice. They don't have the strength to be able to beat them in a straight up fight, right? And that's also why I like when Shinpachi steps up to protect Zenzo, Sarutobi, and the Shogun, right? When he steps up to protect them, and he's standing up by himself. Shinpachi's standing up by himself in front of these Yato that have come through the tunnel, right? And then the Oniwaban come later to help him. So I like this whole feeling of like danger, if you will, because the Yato they really have no chance against them, and they have to use like every ounce of energy and strength to repel them. So I thought that was good. And this is something that I noticed now on my reread and my rewatch in this arc. It's this theme of helplessness and futility. There's like, and which is something I think that is very like morbid even for Gintama, right? Like Gintama, like I said before, has a really good way of infusing maturity and reality in some of its arcs, right? Or I should say, pain and sadness in its arcs, right? Um, Shonen moments that you think are everything's gonna be okay, like in other series, that necessarily doesn't always happen in this arc, or in this series, I should say, right? And so I think it in particular this arc, it just has this great sense of helplessness and futility, which I think is like really different for previous arcs, because Zenzo kills the body double, and the Shogun dies in the end anyway. Sarutobi is, she's taking Zenzo, and then she reaches the tunnel behind the Buddha statue, and then she gets intercepted by Takasugi and Kamui. Like Takasugi appears behind her, stabs her in the stomach, and then you see Kamui and the Yato in the tunnel, right? There's even more helplessness and futility when Takasugi gets stabbed by Oboro, right? Like after the fight between Gintoki and Takasugi finish, like he gets stabbed by Oboro, like with that little blade spear, whatever it is. You can definitely feel the futility when you see Gin's dead eyes face during the funeral for the Shogun. And technically that's the next arc, but we'll just include it here. I would say Takasugi venting his pain on Gin, that in itself is helpless, gives off feelings of helplessness and even futility, because he understands that it's really about the Tendoshu. He has no one else to vent his pain on. I would even say the way that Shoyo died. The way that Shoyo died was just so helpless and futile too, right? It was just like this impossible choice for Gintoki to make. Either you kill your friends, or you kill your comrades and your disciples, your fellow disciples, brothers that you've grown up with, or you kill your master, your father figure, basically, right? So that in itself is very hopeless and futile. And I would also say Shinpachi coming to the end of the tunnel, when they're escaping towards the end of the arc, and then Shinpachi comes out of the tunnel, and then he sees the Tendoshu and Nobunobu waiting for them, like in that ship and everything, right? Even that in itself is, gives off a feeling of helplessness and futility. So I just think that like throughout this entire arc, there's this huge sense of like just hopelessness, and things aren't going to work out, and everything is futile, and it's very nihilistic even for Gintama, because like I said, Gintama, I'm going to repeat this again, but it always balances like like happiness with sadness fairly well, and you really don't get that in this arc. It's just everything is so hopeless and futile. So I thought that was just and I wouldn't necessarily I wouldn't necessarily say I like or dislike it. It's just something that I noticed, and I just think it's like, wow, that's very different for an arc. I think Gintoki and Kagura attacking Kamui and Takasugi, that was really great in the manga. Even in the anime, it is just them running down the cliff, and then they they use their umbrella and sword and just like smack them with it, or they try to hit them with it. That was great. I love the moment where Gintoki tells Kagura and Shinpachi, where he screams, "Let's go!" Like, yo, that shit was so goatee, dude. That moment, oh my goodness, dude. It was better in the manga than the anime to me, but even the anime did it fairly well. Like, they were like, "Let's go, Ikazo!" And then Kagura starts to fight Kamui, Gintoki starts to fight Takasugi, and then Shinpachi starts to defend himself against the Yato. Like, come on, man! Like, that moment in itself, I really liked. I also really liked Kagura's angry expressions when she's fighting Kamui. Those were really cute. Like, she's just like, "Arr," like this, and like her eyes are whited out. Like, that was really cute, and I really liked that. Yeah, I already talked about other Oniwaban coming to help Shinpachi. I like that too, because it makes a lot of sense, right? Like, the Yato are just too strong, though. So even though like it's a incredible moment for Shinpachi to stand up to, what is it, like 20 Yato or 50 Yato or however many Yato there are, like, obviously, like, there's no way that he can realistically defeat them all on his own. So for other Oniwaban members to come and help him, I think that's awesome. I love the moment in the manga where Kagura tells Kamui she will stop him. So I think this is the arc right after, or this is the chapter. I think this is 515 or 516. So Kagura's saying like how she, she's learned, things from her friends and family on Earth, and now, um, she's able to, she's saying that she will stop Kamui. Just that dialogue in of itself just sounds so like perfect and right. So I really like that moment. I already talked about again telling Takasugi to stay alive in the past. I love moments like that. Sanji and Zoro just did it in one of the recent One Piece chapters where in Wano, where Sanji was saying like, if I turn into something, evil or something that emotionless or fucked up, like like his brothers and sister, or like his brothers, I should say. Well, actually, no, like his family. He wants Zoro to kill him, and then Zoro is telling him to just stay alive. You know, Goku and Vegeta have that. Before Vegeta fights Kid Buu for a minute, he's gonna help Goku gather energy as a Super Saiyan 3 for a minute, and Goku tells him stay alive, and then Vegeta in the dub's like thanks, but I'm already dead. I really like those moments, right? It even happens in the Farewell Shinsengumi arc where Hijikata, he says like he's adding a new rule to the Shinsengumi code, Rule 47, and he's like, if you have to break all the other rules to do this, then do it. Survive, So I really like those kinds of moments. Like I said before, the choreography for Gins and Takasugi's fight is incredible. The art in general too is just so freaking good, man. And Takasugi's expressions when he and Gin lock swords is just so great. Like the way that Sorachi drew his face, like when they first lock swords, is so good, dude. Like I can feel, like here's the thing about like good, like trying to think of the best way to say this in words. One of the best things, like to me, whether it's a manga or a movie or a game or whatever it is, that I'm experiencing, how does it make me feel, right? And I'm not just talking about like what do I think about it. Like, does it activate like any sort of like sensory, like can I taste something that's not there? Can I hear something that's not there? Can I feel it on my skin, something that's not there? And I feel like Sorachi accomplished that with this arc, because when I see Takasugi's face, his expressions, and even Gin's expressions too, like I can literally feel my body like react to like all that anger and everything, and I just think that's like the hallmark of something that is truly great. So I think like that is like the stuff that's happening here, like all the choreography and the art and everything in this fight is just incredible. I also like the panel, when Gintoki and Takasugi as kids, like them in the past, when Takasugi, like he finally beats Gintoki like in a like in a sword duel, like in a wooden sword duel, whatever, and then he starts laughing like with the other kids in the dojo. Oh man, that moment was like that. I think that's one moment that I think that the anime not necessarily did better than the manga, but did just as well as the manga at least. So yeah, I really like that panel. Obviously, Gintoki killing Shoyo is like such a tragic and sad moment. Again, Goku kills Grandpa Gohan. Naked Snake, as he's known at the time, kills the boss in Metal Gear Solid 3. Even Solid Snake himself kills Big Boss. Well, quote unquote, kills Big Boss, I should say. So students killing their masters is always like a willfully at that too, or in a sad manner, is like very heartbreaking, right? Domon does that with Master Asia in G Gundam. So yeah, man, I obviously that was like the really big moment. I remember like I was reading that with shout out Shadow Star Hockey, and we were just like, what the fuck did we just read, dude? And yeah, man, I remember that was the moment. That was the moment for me, dude. That was the moment for me. I read that chapter the day it released. I remember that shit clear as day too, man. It was, man. Wow. Almost 6 years ago. So yeah, I again, like all these things that I say, I know I spent a lot of time like maybe criticizing the arc, but everything that I just said, I think heavily, not heavily, but well, moderately outweighs the bad, right? No, actually, heavily outweighs the bad. Well, somewhere between moderately and we'll say like 33%. I don't know. I'm just giving it a number, but no. So anyway, I still think this is a good arc. And one last thing I want to talk about is like towards the end, Shige mentions, and the reason I'm mentioning this is because I saw some people talk about it on Reddit and stuff, and I kind of feel like I should address it here. So Shige has this plan of trying to influence Nobunobu to not be like an asshole and not to like kill him and just stop being an asshole basically. So he has like this line about like how he's got towards the end of the arc, he's gonna hide out in the emperor's place, the palace, and somehow he's gonna try to influence Nobunobu. And people were looking at this as foolish, and I kind of agreed, right? But another thing, the nuance that they're missing is that it's also important to understand that that's not necessarily what he's trying to do, even though that's what he says he's doing, right? He was just saying that as a possible plan. And again, this is going back into what I was talking about, the whole theme of hopelessness and futility, right? He was just saying that as a possible plan because he has no idea what to do. He has no idea what to do, right? Like, Nobunobu is there. They've just, the Tendoshu are there. The Mima Waragumi are there. They've all intercepted. Shinpachi already sees them, and they're all here to, quote unquote, kill, presumably kill Shige, like, while they take him into their hands and everything. And Shige understands that, it's his duty as the shogun, his duty to the citizens of Japan and the country to resist them somehow. So he has no plan. He's just saying, like, he just has to say something, to he just has to he doesn't know what to do, but he has to do something, right? So that's basically the whole point of that line of dialogue there towards the end about how he's going to go, like, hide out at the emperor's place and then try to influence Nobunobu. It's just what he's saying, like, in the heat of the moment, because he has no idea of what to actually do, right? He hasn't thought of a plan yet. So that's just something that I wanted to put out there. But anyway, like I said, I've been going on for like an hour, straight hour, just me talking. Like I said, I still think this is a great arc, even though stuff with the Utsuro later on and Takasugi kind of like kills a little bit of the emotional weight of this arc. But I would say it's still a very good arc. It's still a solid arc, and I still say it's better in the manga than the anime. I still say that. And one thing that's weird. And it's probably because I'm going to talk about Bleach a little bit. It's one thing that's weird is that a lot of people criticize, and I mentioned this on Twitter. A lot of people criticized Kubo for drawing like white backgrounds, and they were saying like, oh, like he's just lazy and all this. But when you read Gintama, you notice that there's a lot of white space in panels, and it's used very effectively, in my opinion. It makes you focus on the characters. It makes the characters that much, makes them stand out. And I just think it's used to great artistic ability, like in the manga, and I just thought that made the storytelling better. So that's what I would say. I would just say it's better in the manga than the anime, in my opinion. But again, it's still a solid arc, still probably the best arc in the entire series, and yeah, I still really like it. And so far, I'm also enjoying the Farewell Shinsengumi arc as well. I haven't gotten to Utsuro's stuff yet. We'll see if I feel any different. I actually know like why Sriracha decided to do that, or I believe I know why Sriracha decided to do this. So I'll talk about that when I do a review for the Farewell Shinsengumi arc. But so far I'm enjoying that, and yeah, I really enjoyed this arc too. So without trying to make this go over an hour, yeah, still a great arc. Still love it. I still think it's the best arc in all Gintama, and I still think it's good. I may have noticed some problems here and there now that I've reread and rewatched it, but at the same time I've noticed some new stuff that I really liked. And if I have to say like my favorite part, I'd say it's between, well, probably the Gintoki killing Shoyo stuff, but just Gintoki's like his strength of character, and then definitely Zenzo. Like those three things together are my favorite parts of the arc. So anyway, thank you guys for watching me for over an hour just rambling on. And I plan to do this for the Farewell Shinsengumi arc at some point. So hopefully I get to do that. And be on the lookout for a Shanks theory video, which is dropping. Yeah, I'll have to get started on that. So, but yeah, anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you on the next video. Peace, and have a nice day or nice night. Yeah, nice night.